Okay, so I came across a link earlier on the British and Global Muslims for Secular Democracy. Without going into huge details, that group, which I've previously quoted, has just undergone a name change, and it's no longer affiliated with the charity, the British Muslims for Secular Democracy. But that's for a whole other video. I'm only mentioning it to clarify because I've mentioned the group before. It's now the British and Global Muslims for Secular Democracy, which is totally independent of the charity. Anyway, they bring about a lot of social issues, not just connected with Muslims, but just general social issues. And a link that was brought up earlier, I thought would make a good subject to discuss because it seems to be the latest tool by regressives to try and control people, and it's utterly pathetic in my opinion. And most of the people, I have to say, on that group agreed. The person who put the link, his view seemed to be that as well, and so did other people. The thing I like about the British and Global Muslims for Secular Democracy is it's a very tolerant group in terms of people can debate, criticize, discuss. It's a very good group, and I recommend it. I might talk more about it in another video. Um, so yeah, they had this link from the New York Post, and basically it's talking about this professor in Michigan State University, and she's talking about how people who practice yoga are contributing to white supremacy. Now, this is the latest cultural appropriation nonsense that has come from, you know what, I don't even want to say the left because that's an insult to reasonable left leaning people. This is just the, the agenda of a very small but unfortunately quite vocal minority of idiots. And I do think it is idiocy. I do. Anyway, I'm going to read out a bit of the report and then discuss it. White people who do a downward facing dog are contributing to a system of power, privilege, and oppression, according to a Michigan State University professor. Shrina Gandhi, a religious studies professor at Michigan State, claims in an article she recently co authored that Americans who practice yoga are contributing to white supremacy and promote the yoga industrial complex. You know, you can't make this stuff up. You could be forgiven for thinking this is satire. Anyway, I'll keep reading. White Americans should learn yoga's history, acknowledge the cultural appropriation they engage in, and possibly reduce the cost of yoga classes for poor people, a group that often includes people of color and recent immigrants such as Indian women to whom this practice rightfully belongs, Gandhi argued. Um, Different subject, but not altogether unrelated. The Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn recently found itself in yet another controversy because apparently white members were being charged £10 more than ethnic minority members at at a local party meeting somewhere. I forget where it was, but this caused a lot of anger. Racial discrimination, but hey, it's okay because it's against white people because we're all privileged. Anyway, to continue the article, apologies for my constant self interrupting here, but yeah, she co authored the piece titled Yoga and the Roots of Cultural Appropriation with Lily Wolfe, a self described anti racist white Jewish organizer, facilitator, and healer. Called for decolonizing yoga, the College Fix reported. The two argued the explosion of yoga studios, yoga videos, apps, yoga pants, and other yoga swag over the last 2 decades is evidence of the misappropriation of yoga that is part of systemic racism built in the labour of black people and people of the global south. Okay, the link itself, the New York Post provides a link, and they have this article. I'm not, I almost find it funny. It's so utterly absurd. Anyway, they have the article on a forum or website. I'm not quite sure what this is. The Praxis Center, Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership. Well, it just reeks of regressive left rhetoric. I don't know. never heard of it before, but Shrina Gandhi and Lily Wolf, get over yourselves. Get over yourselves. This is just beyond absurd. I mean, the whole concept of cultural appropriation, in my opinion, has become hysterical. Are we really saying now that if white people enjoy yoga, which I've never done it myself, but I understand it's recommended for health, it's recommended for physical and mental well-being. If white people engage in this, they're being racist. Are you serious? As for her colleague, Lily Wolf, a self-described anti-racist white Jewish organizer, facilitator and healer, that's pretty obnoxious. Anyone can describe himself as an anti-racist. Calling yourself an anti-racist doesn't mean that your views can't be contentious. It's just part of the obnoxious attitude that these people take. Regressives, I am talking about. That they put these labels on themselves basically to say that we're above criticism because we're pure. We're pure. We have the all-knowing monopoly on righteousness. The arrogance that they show is profound. And the article, I'll just read out the first sort of few sentences. It's laughable, but at the same time, when you consider that these people are academics, they've probably published papers, they're probably teaching classes. That's rather disturbing. This is the introductory paragraph. To the so many white people who practice yoga, please don't stop. Please do take a moment to look outside of yourself and understand how the history of yoga practice in the United States is intimately linked to some of the larger forces of white supremacy. Now, like I say, I don't do yoga myself. I think it's more women than men that do it, but that's beside the point. If I practice yoga, my attitude would be mind your own damn business. This is something I'm enjoying, it's none of your business. And that's what is fundamental about regressives. At their core, they are totalitarians. They are control freaks. And if they were fringe lunatics, it would be easy to laugh at them. But what's concerning is these people do have an influence on university campuses. And if you look at the mantra of the regressive left, like I say, I made a previous video where I spoke about how this is permeating into university campuses. It's actually rather chilling. You know, absurdity aside, when you think of the implications here, it's potentially quite chilling because what they can do, if they start demanding legislation and don't put it past them, then that's dangerous. Now, hopefully, legislators will have common sense and not pander to this nonsense. And it is nonsense, and I'm going to explain why I believe it is nonsense. And I know that many, many people agree with me. I think they are, thankfully, in a minority. Unfortunately, they seem to be an influential minority. The thing about cultural appropriation, it's the polar opposite of what Martin Luther King and the civil rights leaders of the 60s were actually advocating. What they wanted was to get rid of systematic racism that really did discriminate against minority people. Martin Luther King's famous speech, of course, I dream of a day when little black boys and little black girls would join hands with little white boys and little white girls. I bet King, if he was alive today, would be in utter despair at what is being done by so-called anti-racism campaigners. And not just King, other historic, genuine anti-racists. King was reaching out to white people. King never demonized white people. He never said the white people are my enemy. Now, Shrina Gandhi, going by her name, is of South Asian descent, and this strikes me as someone with a huge chip on their shoulder. But to be honest, there's white regressive leftists who get pandered to this sort of nonsense as well. I don't like to say self-hating. I don't like to use that sort of rhetoric, but for white left-leaning people who pander to this, at best they're useful idiots because they're pandering to this sort of regressive, controlling mentality, and they're basically being subservient. They're basically being subservient to this mentality. You are inherently bad because of your skin color. That is what regressive racists like Shrina Gandhi, and I do think this is a racist position, and her colleague, what's let's get her name again, Lily Wolf. That is their mentality. It's but it's absurd because if you actually dig down to it, if you take their message to its most extreme, then the world would firstly be a very boring place because you would have a situation where no ethnic group, no demographic, especially white people, because it is, let's face it, white people they target. You would never be allowed as a white person to enjoy Indian curries. You could never appreciate Australian Aboriginal music like the didgeridoo. Um, if you really get it, I, as someone who appreciates Chinese culture, I could never listen to traditional Chinese musical instruments on YouTube. The erhu, the guzheng, both very pleasant instruments. I find that sort of music very relaxing. So what it actually comes down to is a nasty, petty, controlling attitude. And I really think that these people, it's one thing to laugh at them because their ideas are absurd, but they are influential, so they need to be challenged. I'd like to see counter articles. I'd like to see, for example, if someone like this was brought onto a big news network, I'd like to see them robustly challenged by a journalist doing his or her job and saying, these are attitudes that will offend a lot of people. Because you're patronizing white people, you're saying, please enjoy this, but remember you're a horrible racist for doing so. I mean, if you take the cultural appropriation logic to its extreme, where do you draw a line? Really, where do you draw a line? Because you could shape anything as so-called a cultural appropriation. Surely there's also a contradictory message that is clearly anti-racist because surely appreciating another culture is the opposite of racism. So if, for example, she's arguing yoga originates in the Indian subcontinent, surely that's an appreciation of Indian culture. That's how fucking stupid. And I make no apology for my language because it does make me angry. I think these people, the arguments are not just absurd; they're dangerous actually, because what they want to do is not just they're not happy curtailing freedom of expression. They want to control people's entire lives, the things that we enjoy, the things that we do. The modern world is stressful. People do yoga to de-stress. What the hell gives them a right to tell anyone that they should feel guilty for doing it? I mean, I wonder what Shrina Gandhi's hobbies are. Is she going to say that she purely appreciates Indian culture? For all we know, she appreciates culture from other parts of the world. Well, maybe she is culturally appropriating. I think these people are utterly reprehensible, and it's a very controlling, bullying sort of attitude. I mean, that the forum, like I said, or the website, Leadership for Social Justice, that really gives it away. As for the obnoxious, egotistical self-title that Lily Wolf gives herself, anti-racist white Jewish organizer, facilitator, and healer. You're not healing, you're dividing. I think it's very important that any reasonable person, it doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing. I think this is beyond left and right. I really do. Because I think that a lot of reasonable left leaning people would see this as absurd. I mean, these people are in a league of their own. They are regressive far left, but it even goes beyond that. It's just they're in a league of their own in terms of. I remember a while back, keeping to this subject, there was a young white guy who was sporting dreadlocks because he liked the style. Now, what was interesting was I forget if it was a video clip or if it was an article, I can't quite remember now, But there were some African American people giving him a hard time for culturally appropriating. Of course, dreadlocks being a West Indian um, cultural trait. Um, Others were defending him, I'm pleased to say. They were saying, mind your own damn business. This guy enjoys it. He's not hurting anyone, you know? Um, what bothers me about the whole cultural appropriation narrative is if these control freaks had their way, we'd have a very, very puritanical society. There'd be no colour. There would be no culture at all because you would have a situation where you. The thing is, they will never be happy. The very same people, I guarantee you, if you didn't appreciate outside cultures, they'd say that's also white supremacist. There's no pleasing the likes of Srina Gandhi. And the thing is, this is what bothers me. If anyone stands up to them, then of course they'll play the victim. You know, if people, I don't know if she has a Facebook page or not, and I'm not suggesting people do this, but let's say, for the sake of argument, that white people who took issue with this sent her messages telling her that and telling her that she's being obnoxious and controlling. She would turn around and say, "Oh, I'm the victim of racism." I think these people get away with far too much. I think they need to be exposed. I think their ideas need to be robustly challenged peacefully. And I think the whole regressive movement is toxic. I hate it. I hate it because it is stirring up hatred between people. It stirs up hatred against white people. It stirs up hatred against men. It's the whole concept of it is to divide people, and it tries to tell minority people that they're victims. Now, the good thing is, people are different. People are not defined by the demographics. So there are plenty of black and minority ethnic people who realize this is nonsense. You know, where do you draw a line with this stuff? Can black people not eat Chinese food? Can Chinese people not appreciate Western classical music? Where do you draw the line? It's so stupid. And, you know, I wouldn't be giving this airtime if I thought these were just two fringe nutters, but that's a problem. It's not just the two of them. There's a vocal, a small but vocal minority of regressive control freaks who are out there and they're trying to indoctrinate young minds into this totalitarian garbage. And that's honestly what I believe it is. It's totalitarianism because it's an attack on freedom of conscience. It's an attack on liberty because what they're actually doing is telling people what they can and can't enjoy. I mean, that is when you get down to it. That's what it is. It's sinister. It's very irritating, and it's I don't know. I just think that in some ways this is the most negative social trend in the Western world, probably in the last 20 years. You can get extreme political movements like neo nationalism and so on, which are potentially very, they're very ugly and they can be violent and they can be dangerous. But I would argue, for example, genuine white supremacists, i.e., people who genuinely think that the white race is superior to other races, they are a minority and they are fringe figures. And most reasonable minded people can see that and they polarize them and they criticize them. But what is happening in universities is these regressives are really poisoning the narrative. And anyone who goes against these sort of conventions, for example, Professor Jordan Peterson, are pilloried and scapegoated and shunned. Although it backfires because, thankfully, most people do have a degree of common sense. And I really, really don't think this is about left versus right. I think it's about reason versus control. That's actually what it comes down to. Forget left and right. It's reason versus control. So what do we do? I think the best thing is Don't silence them, don't censor them because that would be hypocritical. Let them have their obnoxious views, but they need to be challenged because people like Srina Gandhi and Lily Wolf believe that they're above criticism. They do believe that. They think we call ourselves anti racists. We're academics, we're anti racist, we're above criticism. That arrogant mentality, they need to be basically taken off their perch. They need to be robustly challenged by journalists doing their jobs. I would love to see them brought onto a show and then utterly dismantled peacefully. I'd like to see them humiliated and put on the spot. They can spout off the views, but they need to be scrutinized because the alternative is they're giving lectures, they're educating young people, and they're poisoning young minds with this sort of divisive, hateful. I mean, when you look at some of the courses that are going on in universities now, um, it's it's so divisive. Apparently, just there's a link to this, and okay, granted, it's Fox News, which is not exactly a neutral source, but apparently there's a white racism course at Florida University which teaches that America is a white supremacist society. Now, if this course, and this is okay, I haven't read the article in depth, but I can envisage what that's all about. If the course is saying that America has a history of racism, no problem. That's truthful, right? Because America does have a history of institutional racism and some very ugly racism. But to teach that America today is fundamentally a white supremacist society, what's that going to do? It's going to indoctrinate young black and Asian and Hispanic students that the white people are your enemy. It's divisive and toxic. So, for all these reasons, I despise the regressive movement. They, of course, won't call themselves that, but that's what it is. It's regressive and it's divisive and it's totalitarian at its core. It really is. Another way to challenge this is to defy it. Enjoy what you enjoy. If you're a white person, enjoy Chinese music. Eat Indian curries. Listen to blues music. And this applies